Hi, I'm going to introduce everyone. This is Candace Craw-Goldman, an expert and lovely friend of mine. She studies and engages with quantum healing hypnosis technique taught by Dolores, the late and great, for those of you who are unaware of that. I am Pamela Aaralyn. I am a clear conduit channel, have been since age 5, for those of you who don't know about me and how Candace got here today. We began to channel Dolores unexpectedly. Dolores actually brought the two of us together. Professionally and personally, she's a really great friend, and I'm a big fan of everything she does. And the reason why she's here today is because we have some things to tell you about a new process that will be created that is going to become the cornerstone of emotional alchemy. That is why we're here. So without further ado, I introduce you to Candace Craw-Goldman. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to this show. I think I was one of the first people that clicked on when the event was decided, and I just was like so excited to just listen. So to be asked to participate is a great honor indeed. I started working in the Dolores Cannon method in 2008. And quickly after just getting started, formed a support forum that Dolores Cannon blessed and continues, the support forum continues to thrive and support practitioners of Dolores's method, those who practice all over the world, the original support forum for quantum healers of the Dolores Cannon method. And after being introduced to Pamela and having this all kind of come together like that, the interest in her work and the expansion of her work is exploding. And Pamela is a great part of that because of how clearly she's able to hear Dolores. And the tissue box, I don't know, Pamela, if you noticed this, but for those of you out there who don't know, Pamela spent part of the day yesterday, the first part of a very long meeting that practitioners in our group were having in St. Joseph, Missouri. She basically led the first part of the meeting with a channeling about an hour and a half or a little longer, I think, of Dolores Cannon. And very quickly, the energy in the room was just massive, monumental, heart-opening, exciting. The people there were giddy, but yet very quiet. And the tissue box was passed round and round the room. I don't know if you saw that. It was very emotional for those of us who know and love Dolores, both those who've met her in person and others who never had that opportunity or blessing. But she was right there in the room with us, and it was amazing. And some of the information, I think, that we may end up talking today, we were starting to talk about yesterday. So this is so exciting to continue the conversation with you 2 days in a row.
Yeah, I'm equally excited. We have so many questions. Prior to coming to this event today, I didn't really, normally I get a lot of interaction from this particular, what we call the A team, for how it's advertised as such. That was a cute little way of us just to bring everyone together. And normally with the way my life goes as a clear conduit channel, it's day and night. There's no off button to this work, guys. So it's, for those who know me and love me and spend a lot of time with me, it's in the middle of the night. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the dinner. It doesn't matter how that goes. It requires a pure dedication to the work. And I have never met someone as equally dedicated and interested and intrigued and conscientious about her studies with this work as Candace. So I am just as blessed to have her here in my life, and for us to be unraveling this journey together. I'm just so immensely grateful all the time. I just sing your praises about how grateful I am to have you in my life exploring this with me, because it's very exciting. About 20 minutes before we started today, they were full on with wanting me to talk about the entanglement theory. And, you know, a few weeks ago, I was awakened at 3:33 a.m., which is one of the times that they really like to wake me up, this little team here. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it is Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Newton recently joined as of yesterday, but not Isaac, Michael. Candace is just learning this. She's probably looking at me like, what?
You mentioned this yesterday. We talked about it yesterday. As a matter of fact, yeah.
Yeah.
briefly though, it was very brief.
Very brief, because he had just joined like an hour before our discussion yesterday with the QHD practitioners, as well as the late and great Dr. Emoto, who Dolores has a lot of respect for. And she began to work with him from Beyond the Veil right away. And what's interesting about all of this is that she has been the intermediator between all of us. She'll go to Candace before she comes to me, and she'll say something special. You're gonna have to tell them about the birds now. You know that, right? And then she'll come to me simultaneously, and I'm in the middle of work and I have to stop. I'll be with a client and I'll say, oh, hold on just a minute. I have to write something down. And then I'll contact Candace later and say, okay, Dolores Cannon just came to me and said, we need to talk to Emoto about this, and we need to talk to Tesla about that. And then an hour later, those two will come to me and say, you need to talk to Dolores about this, to tell Candace about that. And this has been happening for how long now?
A couple, 3, 4 months. I mean, it kind of started small, but lately it's really been picking up and becoming, well, it's astonishing. It's so exciting. It's kind of like being in an amusement park.
Easy for you to say when you get your sleep.
Well, wait a second. Now you say that, but 2:22 a.m. last night, the fire alarm went off in our hotel and woke all of us practitioners up. I was actually having a dream about Dolores. One of the participants of our meeting yesterday, Maddie Miller from Dayton, Ohio, she'd already woken up from a dream about Dolores, where Dolores was telling her, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. And she woke up and she was so excited about it. And she was sitting there thinking about the dream when the fire alarm went off at 2:22. And so, there's some of this happening in our world too, although not as regularly as yours.
Yeah, it is. They told me to read a conversation that was given to me in the middle of the night about, when was this conversation when we posted this in my spiritual community? You remember the conversation about
I do remember.
So I've been told that I need to read and discuss some of this. So we were talking about the cellular membrane, and we were talking about brain hemispheres left and right, and if we should even, go by the theory that, in the New Age theories these days, people are discussing whether or not you should be attempting to connect the two. And this is when I was awakened, because I had that thought, there in the hypnagogic states of my brain, like right there in beta as I was slipping into sleep. And I was awakened around 3:33 with this discussion about the cellular nucleus getting all of the attention in science and in the New Age community as well. And this is when they all began to show up and speak to me. And they have been popping in individually, for about, I want to say about 3 months, all of them. But when this little conversation occurred and they awakened me from sleep, I basically said, okay, I understand that this central brain hemisphere is important according to what Emoto was telling me at the time. But what I said back to Emoto in particular, who raised the question, is the nucleus really the center of everything that you can begin your work? If you want to change emotional alchemy, if you want to build upon it, do you really want to focus on the cell nucleus? Because the cell membrane is what's more important. And I really didn't understand what he was saying to me at the time. So I'm just going to read you verbatim exactly what I said back to him. I said, yeah, I sometimes wonder about this. The nucleus, contains all the DNA, and it has, the genetic structure for maintaining the cells, which, is producing enzymes to keep everything in control metabolically. And I agreed with him. And then he said, well, the cell membrane is important because it controls all the things that need to get into the cell, like sugars, and then it's wrapped up in a bubble, and all the nasty things like bacteria, can then get wasted by lysosomes. And this cellular membrane has, receptors for hormones. And, and then I remember I had been sitting there watching a movie with my partner about, I don't remember what it was at the time, but it was What the Bleep. That's what it was. And they were talking about how the peptides flow through the body. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's exactly what he's talking about. This is also important for understanding if we want to change emotions, we have to start in the brain. And that is going to, if we can control our inner critic states and flow within that, then that is going to allow the inner critic to step out of the way, you know, and that's a mind, body, physic component. That's not just emotions. It's garbage in, garbage out on all levels. So it's going to require a lot of spiritual accountability in every area of your life. But everything that's entering and exiting the cell really applies. And Dr. Emoto wanted to talk about it today because you can, you know, as for many of you who don't know this, he did a lot of studies on water, and he wrote some amazing books about how you can imprint water with specific energetic intentions, you know, and emotional intentions. And he did studies where he would take certain emotional intentions and infuse them into water with thought, and sometimes with the hands over the water. I was just doing this before I started this podcast, and they were in front of me, and I had my water here, and I looked at my light above me, and I imagined that the light was my emotional intention, you know, and then I said, I am, and I happened to be nervous at the time. So what I said was, I am peace. And I put my right hand just a little bit over this, and I then breathed in the color of the light above me while I was setting that intention. And then I watched the cellular structure in this water change. And that's how my vision operates. My vision is a little unique, you know. So I just watched it, and I saw the cells just automatically expand, and then they calmed down and recentered themselves. And it wasn't the nucleus that fascinated me. It was the various levels of the membrane within each particular component of the molecules. It was just what was happening there, you know, at a more of a microscopic level there. So getting back to the conversation, hold on just a second, let me pull that up. Tesla then popped in, and I'm going to read to you what he said. He said, membranes are an amazingly dynamic structure, which resemble either a computer or a sophisticated state-of-the-art warehouse, depending on your perspective. They have fine-tuning of molecules received or expelled that is amazing in its complexity. Emoto responded to him and said, I agree that we cannot use the brain analogy for the nucleus. I think what I'm trying to say is that the membrane does things which are equal to the nucleus in the control of the cell's interior milieu. For example, proteins in the outer membrane can react to the concentrations of organic compounds or ions outside. The membrane receptors have to respond to temperature in the brain or pressure in the case of the skin. The nucleus also responds to outside stresses by changing the nature of the proteins that it allows to be manufactured from internal cell membranes. These proteins are then transported to parts of the cell by membranous delivery vans, known as membrane vesicles. Membranes seem to perform more metabolic tasks in a cell than the nucleus. You know,
so amazing.
And Einstein interjected and said, it's not so much the membrane as the proteins that reside in the membranes, but of course these are coded for by the DNA in the nucleus and in the mitochondria chloroplast. So my question at that point in time, being the non-scientist that I am,
many of us here are the same way.
Right? That's how we both feel at all this. We're just kind of observing and learning just like the rest of you. So my statement back to them was, if the brain is made of cells, therefore collection of cells can be identified as brain. And the brain of the dinosaur T-Rex, for example, was the size of a nut. This is when Dolores gave you that conversation about dinosaurs and birds thereafter. And there's been so many synchronicities. So then I said, when talking about a single cell, how can we actually define brain matter? Dolores then interjected, and she said the question pertained to the function of the brain rather than its physiology. Of course, it is still difficult to draw analogies between the functions of two very difficult organisms, a full-size animal or a single cell, but no one assumed the question was asking if the cell has a multicellular brain within it. Which, when this happened, what was happening in my clairvoyance was I began to see matter collapsing into itself, particularly brain matter. I began to see how you could utilize different emotional components of the cell membrane in a way that allowed you to seek through past lifetime traumas, particularly in these emotional alchemy processes like Dolores Cannon's work, within the quantum healing hypnosis technique, within Teal Swan's completion process, within my own emotional alchemy process, which is called aura alchemy, within so many of the emotional alchemy processes that I've been studying. And so basically we began to talk further about dinosaurs, and and I began to draw the conclusion that, well, if other dinosaurs had much larger brains, then with regard to the brain size of dinosaur, if you're talking about like the Stegosaurus, even there has been a lot of speculation that the Stegosaurus may have had a second brain elsewhere in its body. That theory is not scientifically proven, but the reason why I brought that up at that point to the team is because I would like for them to understand that the heart is the second brain. That's my perception so far in this lifetime, is that brain matter can reside in particular components of the human body, and the heart, I've seen the heart do just as many extraordinary things as I've seen the brain, if not more so. And I'm trying to bring emotional alchemy at an impasse with science and connect the two. This is my goal with having all of you here today. This is my intention.
It sounds a little bit, what you're talking about sounds a little bit like what they are talking about at the Heartmath Institute, about the heart. Are you familiar with the Heartmath?
Yes.
Yeah, so that the heart can calculate before the brain ever can the situation in front of, and it just has a capacity to, it's the first reaction. It's before even anything that can happen intellectually, your heart responds first. So yeah, the interesting part to think about, that it has brain, or thinking cells within it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to me. I've noticed, and I've been watching energetically and physiologically the structure of humans from the time that Source formulates a projection of a soul into an incarnation. What I've noticed is, from watching the fetus develop, the spine develops first. That fascinates me, because that is what fascinates Dolores Cannon. And when she and I were having these conversations, that you and I have discussed before, one of the things that she said to me, Candace, was that, I said to her, the spine is the seat of all knowledge. And she said, that's fascinating that you believe that, because I believe that memories can be stored in the DNA structures, particularly the DNA that we don't utilize right now, which scientists are calling junk DNA. And she would like to open up the theory that they are not junk. They are waiting for what she calls the great spiritual awakening of humanity. So with that being said, this is the goal of this work, to awaken that DNA and get us to the point where we are no longer operating in fear, but residing in love. And when you do that, then you can change the human conscious collective to the degree that fear is no longer the concern. And when fear is no longer the concern, the primitive notions that we have, that pretty much distract all of us from being in our heart centers, dissipate. So she said to me, or I said to her rather, the genetic structures in the seat of the spine, if we study that from the time that we're even born, and because children have an awakening almost right away. If you've noticed the naivety and gentle structures of children before they get acclimated to school and, socioeconomic structures and, politics and religions and everything that programs them, they are innocent beings of love. That is where it starts. It's when this programming, this societal programming comes in that tells us how to be, how to act, what to do, what the rules are, that we begin to suppress things. And what I've noticed when observing the cellular structure of the body in children as they grow between the time that they are a fetus until about age 5, they are actually quite awakened, and it's not junk DNA. They're wide awake. They're seeing things, they're hearing things, they're operating at a level of knowingness that is, oh my goodness, they are awake. Have you observed that as well?
I've thought that as well. I've often wondered if that wasn't part of the reason that infants don't speak for so long, because if they did, it would, or, if they could, it certainly would change all of us, wouldn't it? And as you're speaking, I'm wondering, do you know, have you asked, what does the pineal gland have to do with this? Because we talk about, the veil or the calcification or the hardening, or the pineal gland having the cover over it as they're getting older, as humans are getting older, and how much that has to do with what is perceived and what can be talked about. And of course, the children have a greater connection to who they were, who they are, their past, probably very knowledgeable. And then as we acclimate them into our society and they leave who they were behind and they move into what is our society and our norms, they become molded, and they become more rigid, and everything goes to a place that I think we're trying to deconstruct, right?
The brain changes when the heart changes. And this is what would occur that Emoto in particular has been mentioning to me lately. This is something that this work can shift. We can get back to that state of innocent naivety where the heart is more open so that the brain can follow. The brain actually follows the heart center. The heart is the number one brain. That's what Emoto has recently stated to me in our work together. But yeah, you could go ahead.
May I ask you a really basic question that goes even before all of this? Why, or has each individual member of the team, or have they together told you or alluded to why they are even doing this? If they are already away from being physical humans and they are in the next dimensional plane, why the interest? The bigger question, why are they getting together? How is it important to them? Why are we important to beings who are leaving this plane?
Because we are all God matter. We are all source. We're all connected in that way. They feel responsible too. They're aching to come back. There's some personal bias in that as well. And they all expressed to me that that they're aching to come back, but all of them have, in a very united front, also expressed to me that they will refrain from doing so unless humans are no longer at that teetering point, because this is where we stand in our human conscious collective state of awakening. We are here. It's a very exciting precipice upon which we sit, but the wall, the teeter-totter, could shift either way. And this, if you look at it from a positive standpoint, you could expand from there and decide to take full responsibility and begin an individual and collective process of awakening, or you could become fearful. It is a choice that is always on the precipice of either decline or ascension. So with that being stated, now is the most important part of Earth's evolution. This has never happened before, because Earth's had many resets, and this is something that Dolores and I talk about all the time. For us to come to this point is not new. So with the many resets we have every 4,000 years or so, and that's just me giving it an average, and we've had many, the many parallel dimensions and the many parallel realities that we operate within Earth's structure, those have already made that reset. We haven't. We that are in this third dimensional component, we haven't, and here's the reason why. Earth has reset in every structure in a way that was collective. There was a human conscious collective ascension. Ascension is not the key. We're not going to be lifting off the planet together, like the movie state. That movie that came out recently where the pilot disappears and all of the because he has ascended, and all of the people are screaming on the plane and it's going down. And that was a movie that actually came out that I refused to watch, because it actually disgusted me that people are teaching ascension in a way that all of a sudden we should be afraid because people are going to ascend because they're you. Right? The duality confine is still, that structure is still wide and awake, and even in our New Age communities, unfortunately. But It's not going on that way. What I'm observing with the help of these lovely beings that are here today is that we are individually ascending. And I call that a quickening. Some people call that a fastening. Yeshua called it a quickening when I channeled him last time. What that means is the cellular structures in the, back to the cell membrane, from all areas of the cells in the body are following the rate of the light body. The light body ascension happens first. So in ancient Egypt, they called this the Khat. The Ka. So within the Ka, that's the light body, when it quickens, the Khat, which is the physical, begins to follow. So this is when humans were coming to me and stating, I'm having these terrible spiritual Kundalini awakenings. I'm having panic attacks. I'm having severe depression. I'm having post-traumatic stressors. I'm having triggers left and right. I feel like I'm losing my mind. That was the biggest thing that I, as a channel, was receiving from all of you daily. And finally, this is when Dolores came to me and said, within some of your acceptance and awakening purposes here, it's time that you actually help people do it. So I'm here to express to you that awakening doesn't have to be this bizarre experience where you lose all your loved ones. We are operating in different dimensional frequencies every time we change the structure of our emotions, which is how often?
Many, many times a day. All the time.
So the more you can unify within your purpose, which is an emotional purpose, it's not an action-based purpose, it is a being stated purpose. You're not here with something to do, you're here with something to be. So, yeah, you asked an interesting question a while ago that Tesla is wanting me to answer. You asked about the pineal gland and its, state of function within all of this and what it means. Here's the thing, belief is changing everything about what your body is doing. If you believe that you are walking around with a hardened, calcified pineal gland, you indeed are.
Of course.
If you believe this, then you indeed are doing so. Within his belief structure, he doesn't have time for that belief. Tesla is a pretty curt, direct, to the point man. And when he asked me to answer your question, he said, we don't have time for that belief. We have work to do.
Sounds like Dolores, what Dolores was saying yesterday.
You see why they're on the same wavelength
yes.
now?
Yes, I do.
So the pineal gland, and someone asked a question in our journey yesterday together with your practitioners all around. They asked her a question and it was along the same lines. And if you remember the question, about pineal gland and its function and awakening, you asked, if we really believe that our diet can change everything, then how come we can't walk around just eating what we want, drinking what we want, anything? And the answer that I have right now from Emoto and Tesla combined, they are in a united front telling me that, yes, if you believe those things, but what are the chances that you're actually going to believe those things? And then secondly, why do you believe those things? What kind of belief is that coming from? Do you believe that you can do it because you no longer care, is what Emoto is relating. If you believe that you can do this because you don't care for yourself, the belief system is negative. And then what's going to happen? You're going to get sick. So what is your belief system? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? If you follow the middle way in that path, if you're not looking at it, if you really want to do this, if you really want to formulate a belief system that you could do it, you're not thinking of food as being something that's going to completely edify you or desecrate you. You're thinking as food as a non-applicable situation. Light is more applicable than food. Love is more applicable than food. This is coming from Emoto right now. So food is secondary. At a certain stage in quickening, it is not fully required unless you believe that it is.
Hence the lighter diets and the people who are moving to juicing and liquids, more liquid, more light diets. And that's interesting. So light being first.
Yeah. Yeah, I am immensely hypoglycemic. It is one of my biggest health problems in my life, and I'm still struggling with it. So people will come to me and say, oh, you believe that you could be a breatharian? I'm like, no, not exactly. But here's the interesting shift that happens. When my sugar bottoms out, if I go towards the light first and I set an intention while breathing in that light and saying, I am, and then I insert in the blank, the emotional intention, and I breathe in the color of light that symbolizes that intention for me, what happens is that transmutes the negativity that caused the low blood sugar in the first place.
And that's what we were talking about, transmuting. Because Dolores used to say that when she was alive. She used to say, oh, I don't worry about eating this food or that food, and I don't worry about this or that, because you can just transmute it. And that was part of what that question was. It was like, well, if we can transmute everything, why bother? And so that came back as a brilliant answer. And we're hearing this from a lot of quite experienced spiritual teachers around the world, that belief is the top part of the whole thing. What do you really believe, and where does that belief system come from? And and if you can dismantle it. And I think we went through so many things. We learned so much together yesterday, and of course no time to review it before today, but I think I remember yesterday something coming through of saying, with every single thought, you're modifying your belief system. Every moment of your life, when every thought that you have changes, you're just constantly changing where you are. You're moving through your dimensional states all over the place. And you're also altering your belief system in micro moments throughout your day, depending on your emotional state and how that's affecting your belief system. And that's why you're infinitely moving around, and you're not even really quite sure or quite aware of that, I guess I should say. And fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, now that we're talking about food and water, let's get to questions. We have about 23 of them. And can you see them as I'm seeing them?
I can see them, and I see 38 of them.
Oh, okay. Well, we should get going then. I'll let you read the one by Emily here.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. All the way up at the top. Okay, so Emily asks, can different frequencies of sounds be used during hypnosis induction to facilitate a client to reach a deeper brainwave state, the theta or the somnambulistic level, where the conscious mind is no longer present and the subconscious is fully present? If so, what frequencies? She asks more about specific kinds of frequencies, including the Fibonacci sequence and binaural beats. Dolores answered that pretty specifically yesterday, didn't she? About, what do you remember she saying? Because there were some questions about a sound machine.
Oh yeah, people were asking about Rife, and and she basically stated, and we'll let her come through again for that. She said that everyone's frequency is changing based upon their emotional states, that your frequency is changing constantly. So if you are interjecting in a way that you're carrying certain traumas, and you are coming through and carrying over those core beliefs, which not many people are doing, but some people are. She definitely stated and states again, it reminds me that karma has changed 16 years ago. You're no longer being punished for your sins, is what she's saying right now. So basically with that though, we're carrying so many different responses to frequencies, not just based upon what our positive intentions and our unique soul contracts and soul agreements. Those contracts are changing every time we decide that we no longer feel that we can utilize them. Our frequencies change and follow. Every time we set that intention and we make that notion known, you connect immediately to source with that knowingness of, oh yeah, this emotional frequency is no longer needed. And what happens? Then you require a different sound frequency because you are operating in a different dimension in that moment. Therefore, there's one of two things you can do. You can change that frequency all the time. If you're a real sound buff and you're a frequency being, many of you that follow my work are definitely frequency beings. You can change that. I really love binaural beats. But what brings me to center is something that Dolores calls the source tone. And she's asking me to remind you guys of this now. So the source tone is what sounded you into this incarnation. When source decided to project and experience a perspective through your body, what happened was, what did I do with my trusty soul fork? Here we go. I use this to teach all the time. The soul fork. This is source. This is the best way to describe this. This is your body. When source, this stream is full of billions and billions and billions and endless light years and eons of expressions. So when source decides to come through, this is your soul family. And then there's a split, a little, and this is happening simultaneously. This is a fraction of source. This is a fraction of source. This is a fraction of source. And it comes into your body upon birth simultaneously. So this is you, this is you, this is you. But humans perceive separation within this theory. because you could be embodying your conscious states from this one, your subconscious states, your soul level states here, depending upon how integrated you are operating within each of these, components of source. You're going to be operating at different frequencies all the time, but there is a source tone that sounded you into this earth, if you are a frequency-based being, and then the light of you followed, and then your body, and then your emotional expressions, and then your soul agreements. So within your thoughts, you are shifting that every time you think. Be mindful, be conscious of your thoughts. Your thoughts embody all of that, and you can shift your soul agreement in that moment of time just with the split second of a thought that could be positive or negative. I like the positive, but what I prefer more is the neutral. What are you going to do with the neutral ground when you're not focused on so much positive that you're not sure you believe it, especially if you're coming from way over here in the negative? What you will find is that you shift your thought into neutrality. That is the middle path that provides for birth of the full expression of why you're here. Then you are open. Then you are in allowance of everything that could be. Then you are playing. Then you are an alchemist. When you play with that, that is alchemy.
A little bit more of the Buddhist path there, sort of that road of acceptance and neutrality, detachment.
Yeah, and that's what I'm observing. So, yeah, these questions are coming in.
There's a lot of them.
We do this every time. We talk so much to these scientists that we don't answer any questions. So I'm going to get going. Emily is asking again, how is water best infused? I have been infusing water with love or gratitude by recalling a time when I felt strong love or gratitude, feeling that, seeing the scene in my mind, and then projecting it into the water. Is this an efficient method? How is it best to project this? Can sound enhance this? Emoto says yes to sound. Absolutely. Assign a color to the emotion. This is what Emoto is expressing right now. And I do this in my work too. When you feel something and you are going into that memory, make sure that there's not trauma attached to it, for one. Make sure that that is not going to lead you to any dark shadowy aspect of your subconscious. If it really is a memory that you want to use, then keep it pure. And what you do is you breathe while you're experiencing that emotion. The breath is the isness that connects emotions to light and then sound. So you can go in that way, breath, light, sound, or you can go light, breath, sound. It doesn't matter. It depends upon what he's saying is, it depends upon how you perceive your emotions. Are you a visual person? Is that your dominant etheric ability? Are you coming in a visual way into this earth? If you are a resonance-based being. So you visualize and ask yourself, what color is that emotion? Breathe that color in through your crown chakra, exhale it down and out your hand, place it over the water. And when you're exhaling, make sure that you are imagining that color and that light is the emotion that goes into the water. If you are going to then add sound, that can become complicated, but you would try to figure out from a pure state of mind what source tone applies to that. There are many source tones that can apply to those emotions. So, for example, one of my personal spiritual paths here is compassionate acceptance. So when I came in, there was a source tone that was given, and it is there are three components of it. So it's who, that's H-U, E, just the long E, and then A-U-M. So when you combine those three together, what happens is a phenomenal thing occurs. And some people call this harmonics. Some people call it overtone chanting. There are many, ways to go about experiencing that. But essentially, when you sing that tone, if you can sound it, if not, listen to it, have someone sound it for you, go to a sound alchemist. There are a few of them on this earth that I know that do sound alchemy, but go to a sound alchemist, find out your source tone, or learn it yourself. Transcendental meditation is a beautiful way to learn your source tone. The only thing that I disagree a little bit with TM in this regard is that they tend to give you your source tone. You have to discover your source tone. It cannot be given to you. This is not something that someone can come in and say, oh, it's this, it's Ram, it's Ling, it's whatever it is that they tell you not to tell anyone else.
May I ask you a question in there? Because earlier when you were talking about the resonance beings and the colors of light, and you're offering the idea of assigning a color. I know that some people, want to be told what the correct color is, but you're saying assign one. You're saying you choose.
You choose, you are source. You get to decide that. And when you're in the midst of that memory, and that's the most important part of what we're going to be teaching in your new process, Beyond Quantum Healing, which I would love for you to talk about because Dolores is wanting you to. That's one of the things that she's wanting you to do, is to assign color to a new positive core belief that you would like to feel instead of the trauma that the client experiences. This is how we change emotional alchemy, when they assign the color.
Just a minute. So the client themselves, or you, if you're working on yourself, you decide this. Because, one of the things we're trying to do here anyway, I think, and you tell me, we're trying to reclaim some of our power, some of the power that all of these control-based systems, these belief systems that we end up picking up from our parents and our clergy and our teachers and our society and our political system, and all of that just keep pounding these belief systems, and most of them are disempowering because, there's all these rules and there's all these things about you must do this, or this. And I love the fact you mentioned it earlier, that even in the spiritual community, even in the metaphysical community, we tend to kind of go down. Well, at first you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and it has to be this, and reclaiming some of that power of deciding what it has to be or not, even in so much as choosing the color to possibly use in this way, is a beautiful thing. I think a really wonderful way to begin giving the power back to the soul itself.
Mm-hmm. I like that, how you put that, giving the power back to the soul itself, when we understand that there is no separation. What Tesla's describing right now is that the perception of separation, the perception that we have fragmented components, is definitely a human perception.
Yes.
Let's get to another question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can go with that. You like the frequency question? Are you seeing that one?
Oh, there's so many, Pamela. I don't know which one you might be looking at.
Emily, are different frequencies associated with the left and right hemispheres of the brain? Tesla states that is unique to the individual. If working with a client who is very analytical, left-brained, is there a frequency we can play alongside visual guidance induction to get them into a more right brain state and eventually, question went away. Okay, is there a frequency we can play alongside visual guidance induction to get them into a more right brain state and eventually push the conscious mind aside? Dolores is coming through and she states there is much resistance in the left brain, within the hemispheres of the left brain, and with beings who operate in that capacity. There is much resistance. That is cover for fear. And find out which emotions caused the fear. Find out which traumas caused the fear, is what she's stating. You can't just switch it with a frequency. You have to go deeper into the trauma. This is how the 3D works. We approach the shadow and honor it, validate, understand, what occurred, and sit within it. This is something that I teach that we call presence. This is what Dolores and I call compassionate presence. When you compassionately hold a space for someone who is persisting within a deep state of trauma, compassion is the frequency itself that enlightens the fear-based frequency. So your compassion alone, especially within the use of the I am, she's reminding us, that's what's going to lift that frequency. It's not going to matter. Tesla said, it's not going to matter what sounds you play, what tones you induce.
Yeah. I love that, because it goes back to what is happening in your heart. Yes. As a facilitator, as a practitioner, for goodness sake, as a friend. If you are a friend and sitting next to somebody who is having some issues or some trauma, what is happening in your heart is more helpful for them than doing anything mechanical like playing a tone on a machine. And that's what Dolores was talking about, that you could, she talked a little bit more about the different things you could do. And she's like, why And even in real life, she used to say, why have so many bells and whistles? She used to say that all the time. You don't need the bells and whistles. And then she was talking about using your own voice, using your own intention, using your own power to help the intention. And what the practitioner does, what the facilitator does, what the friend does is just kind of be there with them, holding the space. We use that term all the time, don't we? We're going to hold the space for the client. Some of us in this community, I think, use that term so loosely, we don't really think about what that means and what is really happening with that. And that is having compassion in your heart and working with the heart with your client so that it is a heart-based interaction.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Barbara here that's really interesting. And Tesla has answered this question for me before. Newton's interjecting a little bit about it. He's not as talkative as the rest of them. I'm not quite used to him yet. Are you looking at it? It's from Barbara, and it is, what can we do as individuals to counter the effects of EMF on ourselves and all living bees? You know, bees, birds, insects, etc. Let me see what he's saying about that. He says, more personal accountability for yourselves and your environments, please. The frequencies that you are emitting unconsciously and consciously into your environments, your environmental toxins, the noise pollution from your engines, the sound pollution is out of control. If we take more personal responsibility for ourselves in that way, do you really have to drive? Can you limit the amount of time you drive? Can you limit your noise? Can you limit your environmental waste? It's not just the noise, it's the combination of all of the toxicity, you know, from the fumes from cars, the sounds from cars, many of that. Can we, you know, he says there's a team of scientists right now, 2 brothers operating out of Russia, that have been working on a model that they're trying to a model of car that they're trying to get, you know, approved right now. That it's really exciting. And he said that if America can, he said if they can play well in their diplomatic sandbox, is how he put it, then we can answer a lot of these problems. If the government took enough responsibility to help us become more environmentally accountable for that pollution, then yes, we could do that. It's about the large amount of noise pollution and environmental pollution. So we can change that individually. Hope that answered your question. Let's go to, what do you have to say?
I see another pollution question from Julie. She asks kind of a similar question, but about water. There's so much water pollution going on. Maybe Emoto has something to say about that. Florida and the state taken by, or the stand taken by the Native Americans about the pipeline. And there's been so many spills and toxins put into the water. And some of us feel completely helpless about that. You know, what does Emoto have to say? Can we as a collective, as individuals, do anything at all about that?
He's advising caution. He said, we can come together in unity and love and work together individually at local levels and then collectively, but it starts at an individual level, because collectively speaking, he states the fear in the human conscious collective is so expansive and rampant right now that when we come together for these very difficult issues, he's saying what we tend to do is get into fear.
And ramp that up.
And we amp it up, and then we become, he says, then we feed on it and it expands, and he's going like this, and then it expands. So that can become even more detrimental, and if we stand individually with the issue, then, and we work individually and locally, working consciously at a human conscious collective within the human conscious collective fear, the only way to go with that is to introduce love and to be more individually accountable. Oh, here's a question for Tesla. You see that? What is a good starting point for harnessing electricity from the atmosphere to move us away from the electric grid? He says you can utilize and build your own Wycliffe model. Now, I don't understand the Wycliffe model very much. He built a tower. I know that because he showed it to me. And I didn't understand his history to grasp exactly what he meant. But he said within the understanding how to harness piezoelectrical force and then release it. That is your answer, utilizing coil, quartz, powerful magnets, and then amplification of frequencies within amplification of radio frequencies. He could get going forever on this kind of stuff, and being that I don't understand what he's talking about, what Emoto is saying to expand is that you have to do this individually. The governments will put so much restriction on what you can and can't do insofar as developing these models, that by the time our scientific community begins to develop anything that allows us to have free energy, it's like that. This is what he just did with his hands. So we have to individually.
Along that line, here's another question that in the same area. Michael wants to know if Tesla seems to have literally equated water, the flow of electricity, to the flow of liquid water. And in doing so, he proved that electricity has current and that it flows faster under pressure and has eddies, reverse its flow, all of that. So the question then for Tesla is, does electricity also come in other forms like water? Or, you know, is it a solid, a liquid, a gas, plasma, etc.?
He said consider plasma technology as what's new and up and coming. You know, there's a foundation that he is telling me right now, and I can't pronounce it, but I can spell it. I believe that he's out K-E-S-K-A or K-E-S-H-E or K-E-S-K-E. One of you can look that up for me.
It's the Kesh Foundation. Is that? Yeah, I think I even know what that is. There's a foundation out there that's
okay.
There's a foundation out there. I think it's, and I'm going to say it incorrectly as well, and maybe some of our viewers or listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Kesh Foundation is operating on this idea of free or 0 point energy electricity out there, and it's a real big program that's gaining some traction. So Tesla approves of this.
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Very much so. So he said, and consider plasma technology because they're right on top of it. So that's who you need to be supporting, people.
Cool. How wonderful. Big spelling at you. I love that.
Yeah, sometimes he has to spell it because I don't know what he's talking about. I'm not a scientist. Let's answer a question from an anonymous viewer. This is for Dolores. Can you describe how you see the potential expansion of beyond quantum healing? How is this going to happen? What will this look like in 5 years? So within this anonymous question, beyond quantum, just that phrase, that's right up Candace's alley. We've been for 2 months now about what Dolores would like to do. And she is vehemently working with us behind the scenes to expand. And she wants the work to be less restrictive. She's coming to a point where she understands that many of you who are experiencing the quantum healing hypnosis technique felt a little bit limited, as if because you weren't going into the deeper somnambulistic states that you were not receiving the full benefit. And while that may or may not be true for some, I've seen some amazing results from the QHHT process. What she has been teaching us now is something that she believes will have a more expanded result because it is not limited to merely the somnambulistic state. Therefore, if within a regression, you do not go into the full soul level, the deepest level of the soul level that you feel that you can expand into for releasing of trauma, you can work just as equally if you follow your different states of existence. This is back to understanding how the cellular membrane works. So there are many levels of the cellular membrane. This is the same in the soul state. So the brain is very similar, you know, to what's happening in your emotional states of alpha, beta, theta, somnambulistic. So if, for instance, if you are regressed and you can't seem to stay there, if you come out of that in the alchemy processes, mine or anyone's, if you come out of regression, if you come out of hypnosis, if you come out, go into the inner critic and allow for that, provide an allowance, you know, and see what happens. There's just as much work that can be done on those levels as any other level. So that's how she would like to expand, is by allowing, following the breath, following the light, following the sound, combining all three, invoking the I am more, and following the client as opposed to telling the client where they should be at each level of their expansion.
Right.
So follow the client is what Dolores is saying. That is how we expand further.
I'd like to follow up by just saying this. I get many questions, sometimes daily, from both practitioners, when we discuss this amongst ourselves, and even clients throughout the world who say, I had a session, but I didn't go to the deep somnambulistic level, so it was a failure. And this new information from Dolores really helps that concern on both the side of a client and a practitioner. She basically says, stop resisting the resistance. Stop resisting that. If there's resistance, it's because you're supposed to face that direct on. You're not supposed to just go, oh, I need another tool. Oh, we need to do something else about this. We need to get them back there. She's like, they're there for a reason. They're there for a reason, and here's some of the things that you can do when you're there. And this, this is like a breath of fresh air, some of this information coming from her, from beyond the veil, along with the idea that the sessions don't have to be as lengthy, that some of the things that she wants to teach us is going to bring these sessions down to a much more manageable level, because, and she was saying this about time, she's like, you've got to get going on this, and the less time you spend like in this way, the more you can help, the more people you can help. And so it's really exciting times in the quantum healing world.
I agree. Let's take a question from Deborah. This appears to be directed towards Einstein. Einstein once said about Christian Science and Mary Baker Eddy, do you know what you have here? Einstein seemed impressed with Christian Science as a method for healing medical disease. And she's asking, do you still think this?
Oh my goodness.
I think I just got a scientific face palm. With that, he went,
oh my
with that,
goodness.
he says, I'm not impressed with anything that is preceded by the word religion,
Yep.
particularly the Christian religion. He's making that very clear. I'm not impressed with religion as a science at all. Okay. He said, at the time, my understanding was that anything that included science, if religion could possibly include science, it was at the forefront of revolution. Humans needed revolution at that time. We are beyond that. We don't need revolution. We need unification. Go within. Don't go to your religions. Don't go to your paradigms, is what he's saying. Okay. Let's take another question here. This is interesting. My doctor compared my cells to polyester.
I saw that question.
Saying that as we age, our cells are less permeable to water and hydration. Emoto nods and confirms that. Can you please ask the masters if there's something I can add or do to correct this? Also, what's the best source for non-fluoridated water? Emoto said that is a tall order in your current environment. He's referring to the last question. He's not going to answer that, I'm sorry. Tesla does enjoy the process of reverse osmosis. He adds that, and that could be a bit of an answer here. However, what do you believe about your water is what Emoto is bringing to the surface now. This applies to everything. What do you believe is occurring in your water? If you believe that any specific type of water is good or bad, it becomes as such. And so far as the question about dehydration as you age, Einstein said the simple answer is drink more. The not so simple answer is, what do you believe about the water that you're consuming? The more advanced answer is even further, what is the source of your water? Consider the lands, consider the soils. What's the alchemy of the soils and the lands? we're going back to the source in a deeper way. And what he's showing me right now visually is a giant pipeline of everything connected together. And with that being stated, it looks to me like what he's showing me is a bunch of PVC pipes. He doesn't like the PVC pipe model. That needs to change. It holds too much bacteria. This is an issue, is what he's showing me. He's showing me the inside of the pipes and the lining of the pipes being an issue, and then how they clean that, in our water purification systems, at the collective level here in our water purification plants, that's a big problem. So the problem, when you think about all of these human conscious collective problems, you just are going to breed more problems. What can you do individually is what Dolores is now interjecting. What can you do individually to have access to your own water source? Because you can't control a collective problem with water purification. So why focus on what you cannot control, is what she's stating. And Emoto is nodding with her. And then we go back to that human conscious collective fear issue that I was discussing earlier, that Emoto was bringing up. When we go too much into these issues, it's there. Tesla and Einstein are right. Yes, we need to collectively find a way to get a better water purification system. Tesla is mentioning that the ancient Aztecs had some interesting irrigation systems that perhaps we should reconsider.
Nice. Jennifer asks some more interesting questions about water too. She said she's read somewhere many years ago that spirits on the other side can see our world like it's liquid matter, almost like it's water. So her question is about talking to water. Of course, Emoto is doing that even when he was alive, and infuse it with love, because our bodies are 70 to 80% water. But she goes ahead and asks, is there a way to connect to the collective unconscious in our universe, all liquid matter, to infuse love and healing to help raise the consciousness of humanity? So I guess basically going to the source of water. But it's true, our bodies are so much water, they are being affected by our collective belief system. Isn't it the water that holds those belief systems?
Yes, absolutely. And we don't want to focus too much on anything that causes us to experience more fear, is what Emoto is interjecting at this time. Let's see, I'm looking at some more questions. Someone is asking, please explain what you mean by emotional.
You're getting a little feedback. You're doing your
voice again.
Your Yeshua voice is coming back.
Got it. Is that better?
That is better.
Okay, awesome. Got to ground that out sometimes. Sorry.
It's all right.
Julie is asking, please explain what you mean by emotional alchemy. Dolores would like to answer that. She states, you are combining what you believe emotionally about yourselves on all levels of your existence. So going back to the beyond quantum healing that we're going to be discussing soon, she would like to go way beyond what we believe that we can do. And when you expand the power of what you believe that you can do, then alchemy really, really works in your benefit, is what she's stating. But it's just a combination of all your emotional states so that you transmute what you believe is negative into a more beneficial, positive belief system. It's combinations of, and within my particular perspective of emotional alchemy, I combine emotions with light and sound and the I am. The I am is the sound when you voice it, the light is the visualization, and then of course we have the emotions that we focus on within our intent systems.
I saw a question, Mary asked a question about light that might be great to answer, that's right up that alley. And I'm not seeing it at the moment. There it is. She wants to know, so how does this light enter our body, and how does the light enter the cells? I know you were talking about visualization, but is that all it takes?
No, what Emoto is stating right now is that the breath is the light. Breath is all of life. Breath is life. So when you are breathing and then you visualize along with your breath, light naturally enters. So the breath pulls it in.
So if you, let's play devil's advocate. If you're holding your breath and you try to visualize light coming in, it won't work?
Yeah, I am really, really, being the emotional alchemist that I am, I will personally have issues with breath where if I am experiencing anxiety, I will just stop my breath. I will just automatically go into a state of paralysis where my breath goes, and then people around me go, breathe. And I just hear it and I'm like, okay, got it, we're good. Do it all the time, all day long. Fear can actually stop your breath because fear is the opposite, of what breath offers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at some more of these questions. Just give me a moment. Yeah, we need to clarify that. Emily is stating a while ago, Emoto told Pamela that cellular wall in the brain is the center of the brain. Einstein says that's different. Are you talking about humans? Are you talking about plant matter? Or are you talking about animals? Because the cellular wall is utilized within animals, within certain animals and certain plants, but not for humans. It's the cellular membrane. This is central brain hemisphere is what, going back to her question. Cellular membrane, I'm assuming that's what she's meaning. Cellular membrane is the center of the brain. This is the central brain hemisphere. What is the anatomical name for this cellular brain hemisphere? Is it the pineal? Or bicellular membrane? Is he referring to the neuronal membranes of all neurons? He said it's all. This is what Newton interjects a little bit. He said it's all, but when you combine the energy that occurs between the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, and the hypothalamus, he's pointing, so I am too, that just happens. Then the combination of all those three, when you activate all of those three, because one activates the mind, one activates the body, one activates the spirit. So that is what's going to get you your best results in our awakenings here. Hopefully that answered your question. What do you think about that, Candace?
I think that part of me should keep a pad and pencil here and write some of this down because there's such deep information coming through. I need to review some of that myself.
You want me to repeat it? It is the he said the pineal gland and the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus area. When you activate light and sound within the alchemy of all three, then you are awakening the human system.
I guess my question is, do you need to even know that? Do you need to know the parts and pieces and the names and because there's some people who aren't, their brain doesn't have the intellectual capacity to hold on to all of them.
Let me break it down. Mind, body, spirit.
There you go. There you go.
Lessen the inner critic, provide presence for trauma, provide validation and allowance, and compassion, hold a compassionate presence for the emotional triggers and the traumas that you experience in the mind center. That is going to open up, is going to dampen the inner critic, heal the ego, and drop you from the hypothalamus-induced center into the more pineal area. So that is going to effectively stop the issue that humans are complaining about. This is the way that Tesla puts it, that humans are complaining about. With the calcification of the pineal gland.
So another way of saying that maybe is that's where a lot of fear and worry is generated?
From the hypothalamus, Newton adds, that's where fear and worry, it's primitive.
Oh, we have Newton talking.
He's talking a little bit more, yeah.
And you said that he has a very scientific way of looking at things. I find that fascinating.
And of course, he would pop in on that question,
right?
Yeah. So, yeah, let's.
I saw a question from Manjeet, and I like this question because of the increasing numbers of autistic children that we're finding coming to light or being born. And so Manjeet asks about autistic children. Can they be healed if they're slow learners? Is autism even something that needs healing? What does the spiritual A team have to say about autism in general is my question that goes along with that.
They're all shaking their heads at me. It's not, and they're all talking over each other, and they're like, What? Why is this a disease? Is what Newton said. Right. Why is this a DSM? Is what Einstein said. I'm just trying to repeat because I'm angry. Yeah, that happens even in 4D. Some of these beings haven't gone into their fifth dimensional presence fully because they're sticking around trying to help Earth. That's something that someone asked me, you know, why are they still so much into these 3D terms? This is why they won't move forward into 5D until we do. Something that has been said.
Wow, they're going to hang out with us.
Yeah, I made that decision too. I had the choice to go into more of a fifth dimensional capacity here on this Earth, and I actually chose 4D. I like it. Yeah.
So the spiritual A team is going to be around a while to help us. How cool is that?
Yeah, they definitely will. But they have their own interests as well. They want spirit to finally understand that science is spirit and spirit is science. That's what Emoto is saying right now.
Well, what do they have to say about autism? You know, this is a huge thing in many people's lives right now. How do we begin to understand that, especially as we watch our loved ones or if we're parents of an autistic child? How do we think about it from the perspective of the spiritual A team?
Emoto says, why are you trying to heal them? Why don't you learn from them? They're here to teach you. Einstein says, of course, you can study their brain matter. Of course, you can do all of these things, or you can let it be. He said, I've done these studies. Many people have done these studies. Why are you trying to change something that is already evolved, is what Newton is expanding with.
I think a lot of the, you know, the very, it's really basic. There's the numbers are increasing, I guess, why? And those who are severely autistic need care. They, you know, they're taking the numbers, you know, in our world right now, we're still working jobs, earning money and paying bills. Mm-hmm. So those who are severely affected or higher on the autism scale don't go into that realm. And there's more of this, you know, on this end who are having to be caregivers. I think that's some of the real question here is there seems to be a trajectory and there's a thought or maybe even a, you know, let's face it, let's say it, a fear that pretty soon, you know, the numbers are going to be going to be so astronomical that everything will fall apart, that there won't be people around to provide the care, the you know, the housing, the feeding, all of that of those who aren't able to do that themselves, at least the way reality is constructed right now.
Yeah, Dolores Cannon was just having me out about the channel, and she wrote down, well, examine your belief system. What's bad about the fact that you'll need to be a caregiver? That's fear-based collective consciousness. We are going towards intentional families, intentional communities, the understanding that love is at the core of everything. At some point, money won't be needed. We'll be exchanging that care to the extent that the more we release fear of what's needed, and the less we will need to assign our belief system onto these artistic children and adults. If we're going to care for them, care for them. Yes, they need care, give it. Yes, they need medical help, give it. And what the A-team is united from a united front stating to me is, why is this a problem? Focus more on what you can do to lessen the environmental pollution in your water, and your air, and your noise pollution, your EMF. There's so much going on in that. If you want to correct the problem, start there. But please understand that it isn't as big of a problem if you stop perceiving it as a problem. How do you choose to perceive it collectively? Change the collective perception of what you believe is disease, what you believe is dysfunction.
So because they said that, does that mean that is some of those environmental things, the pollution and the toxins and maybe even the vaccinations, are those in fact part of the core reason that the numbers are increasing?
Yes, they're nodding. Newton is bringing up the theory of the metal in vaccines. You know, we don't want to go too deep into that because it does promote a lot of fear, but the vaccines, they definitely don't like that. That's something that we need to work individually and collectively to cease. That has been a problem. That's what began this problem. That's what perpetuates this problem. That's what Tesla is saying. And until we eliminate vaccines altogether, then it is going to continue to be a problem.
Well, right you know, the lines with that is here a question by Love Neat. I hope I say that right. Asks about how do you get rid of worry? So, I mean, we might worry about pollution or vaccines or whatever. Anyway, Love Neat says, I noticed I was perfectly fine on the path until recently. Oh, there it jumped. Until recently, something got me worried. And is worry a part of fear? And yes, it is. I know you can answer that. What I'm trying to say is, you know, how does one know, how does one deal when it sees worry coming towards you or fearful things coming towards you? What's something we can do for ourselves?
Dolores wants to answer that one. She said, remember to invoke the I am. What would you choose to feel instead of that? You can validate how you feel, but how long are you going to attach that to that emotion? That helps you remain in the shadow. If you attach to that emotion, you choose what emotion you want to feel. Validate it, feel it, breathe, and then release it. Focus on your breath and ask yourself, what would I choose to feel instead? That is what she says. Worry is a big problem. And it is a big problem because it's the basis of all fear, and it perpetuates more problems. So when you can catch yourself with this. Candace and you and I were talking about this not long ago when one of my ancestors came through, and I was at the top of a mountain. I had been on a tremendous hike and I was exhausted, and I sat down to contact some of my own A-team, and they were all surrounding me, and a big giant antelope, I'm a big male, came up, and he stood in front of me, and antelope can be a little shy, so I wasn't expecting this, but he looked a little territorial, and he looked a little bit like he didn't want me to be there. And I was sitting there meditating, and I put down my singing bowl, and I just looked at him, and he looked directly at me. And there's a moment that occurs before the hypothalamus can kick in, before the fight or flight response can take over. When you're sitting there deciding if you're going to worry, how about go within what happens before the fight or flight kicks in? That's trust. It's a very vulnerable state in which you can operate. That is allowance. Go deeper into the alchemy of it. What color is it? What does it sound like to you? Where would you like to feel it in your body? Breathe it in with an I am invocation. I am trust. That is your key to stopping worry every time. That is how I switch myself from worry, and all of my clients follow that. And many of my clients follow that as well.
I love that story because I remember you talking about it before, and it really has to do with that. That was programmed in us when we were doing much of life the way you were that day out in the wild, where there are these big animals or these other things that bodily might have some effect on what's going on in our safety. But in most of our regular day-to-day world, we don't have to worry about that sort of connection. Most of our fears and worries, present themselves a little less directly than a big animal next to us. But we don't have practice of that moment of deciding whether or not we're going to be afraid. We need to have a little more practice to think about that. And I like the way that you're talking about that. We're so conditioned to go immediately into fight or flight. And we as humans, though, we have that capacity to decide, and it's the moment right before you have the fear, and it's the moment right before you have the emotion of almost anything, and we really do have that moment. We might not think we do. We might think it's automatic, but it's not. You have that moment, and then you can decide, and that gives you power.
It does, definitely. And speaking of power, that is another frequency that Tesla loves, that particular emotional frequency, empowerment. And whenever he steps in sometimes during my alchemy sessions, and he goes, yeah, that one needs empowerment. So when you invoke the I am to call back your power, you can do that through the space of all time infinitum. You don't have to limit that by saying, what many yogis will say, I call back my power from north, east, west, and south. We go deeper in alchemy. We start there, and then we say, I invoke the I am in me to call back my power through the space of all time infinitum. That's everything that you have ever experienced. So if you're worried about past lifetime trauma, there's your answer.
That's a great habit to get into. And the more you do that, the less you immediately go into worry or fight or flight.
Exactly. It's a question, and rather a statement at first about Einstein. Let's see. Einstein indicated time as a spiral line, a slinky toy, not a linear line. That's how I view it as well. And the reason why I'm answering this is because it gives me a chance to discuss something that the A team was like 5 minutes before. They were like, you need to discuss the entanglement theory and you have 5 minutes. And I'm like, I don't know what the entanglement theory is. So basically speaking, when it comes to different levels of consciousness connecting throughout time, there's something that attaches. That something is the soul. So there is no separation. When source expands, going back to this, what I call the soul fork here, if this is source, if this is soul stream consciousness, if this is a human, say this one could be in the Pleiades system somewhere. This is a human somewhere on Earth. This is someone that, perhaps this is an Arcturian version of you, somewhere out in the Butes constellation, wherever it will be. This is you, this is you, this is you, and you, source is experiencing you throughout the space of all time infinitum. Therefore, this is what humans know as deja vu. This is what we are experiencing whenever we go through awakenings and we have what we call, Kundalini awakenings, we call the divine remembrance, remembering our divinity. There's many ways of putting it. And then when you have triggers that you don't really understand, and then you go into regression, especially with QHHT, and you're like, oh, this makes sense now. This makes sense why I have PTSD from firecrackers when I'm not a veteran. Like, this didn't happen in this lifetime. And then they pull up a memory from another lifetime. Those things are actually happening simultaneously. So the spiral line, the slinky toy, if you will, for what this particular guest indicated, Einstein agrees with that. And he was having me draw this for you guys. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I'm a terrible artist. So this is you, and this is another version of you. So there's a line here. Notice this looks like DNA?
Yes, it does.
Uh-huh. The straight line is the soul. That is the somnambulistic state. That's the deepest level that you can get, and that is what connects everyone throughout the space of all time infinitum. The other two lines that connect you are the alpha and the beta. You are connected there as well. You are not just connected at the soul. They're all soul. We're perceiving them as separate. That's why the lines are separate, but it's all soul matter. It connects all of us. So yes, it is like what this person is saying.
That's a beautiful drawing to explain. As you're saying that, I was remembering a session of my own that happened, I think, in 2012, where during a QHHT session, I was able to talk to an aspect of mine that was currently living in the Orion constellation planet, and it was a male presence. And I remember we had a conversation with each other. It was one of the most fascinating sessions I've ever had in my life. And at one point, out of my mouth, out of my body, I was speaking as this big male kind of warrior type of presence who was looking at me having this session, on Earth. And I'll never forget what it felt like coming out of my voice, because this big guy, almost like had big, I don't know, like not armor, but big pelts or coats on him. He was just this big, broad-shouldered, huge thing. And he was looking down, and he was realizing that he was a part of me as I was realizing that I was a part of him. And he was looking down and he said, but she's so little. And he was so fascinated by this, because he had an idea of my presence as I had an idea of his. But we got a better look at each other during one of these sessions. Another fascinating thing that happens during this kind of quantum healing work.
And what's interesting is what Dolores was stating while you were saying. She said, and he and his aspect of himself, wherever he's located, he could have been having a divine awakening of his remembrance. And then he woke up and said, I had this fascinating dream of being a human.
I actually saw where he was. Or in my mind, like on a precipice, on a rock, like out maybe meditating the way you do, like with an expanse out there, all alone. He's in deep contemplation, and he's imagining this piece of him in this other place, as I was imagining him there. It was fascinating. And by the way, Dolores, you were downstairs at a hotel room teaching a class when I was having that moment. So we were very close. At the time, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, she knows about that. She knew exactly that other being was experiencing consciousness in a way that wherein he was awakening to his aspect of you. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
That fun.
Oh, well, this was such a great session. I'm going to be wrapping it up. Is there anything that you would like to discuss before I do, Candace?
Not at all. Just look how, for me, how fast time went. We've been doing this for an hour and a half. It seems like we've been chatting for 10 minutes. I know there's so many more questions. I know you maxed out on participants. There's so much interest in the combination of these magnificent spirits coming together and speaking through you. You're such a gift for us all. I can't wait to hear about some of your midnight to 3:30 a.m. conversations again in the future, and keep us posted, would you?
They're coming to you the next time it happens. I'm just going to refuse and say, go to Candace.
Yeah, call forwarding. My husband says from across the room, I have kept my phone not bedside. I'm waiting for the call. I promise I will take it for you. I will try anyway. Yeah.
Just put them all on speakerphone and tell them to speak up.
I love it. I love it. It's just been such a blessing. Thank you not only for today and this sharing, but yesterday as well. The reverberations from some of this information and the connections and the ideas and the excitement about going forward are going like this all across the world. Bless you. Thank you, Pamela.
Many blessings. I love what you're doing in the world of emotional alchemy, and I look forward to more work with you. I'm so excited and fascinated by what you have to offer, and to be continued, part 2.
Part 2. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tesla and Einstein and Emoto and Cannon, the spiritual aid team. Thank you.
All right. Much love.
Much love. Bye-bye, everyone.